Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the stars through the main screen. His ship had been patrolling the outer rim for 3 months without seeing anything more dangerous than space pirates. The year 2387 had been quiet so far, and Jake preferred it that way. His crew of 200 men and women deserved some peace after the border wars with the Crimson Fleet had ended. The communication officer turned toward him with a worried look on her face. Lieutenant. Amy Rodriguez had been with Jake for 5 years, and he trusted her judgment completely. She never looked worried unless something was seriously wrong. Captain, we are getting a distress signal from coordinates 749, Mark 12, Amy said while checking her instruments again. The signal is weak, but it appears to be coming from an unknown ship design. Jake walked over to her station and looked at the readouts. The signal was indeed strange and unlike anything in their databases. Human ships all used standard frequencies, and this was definitely not human. It could be pirates trying to trick them, but something about the signal felt different. Set course for those coordinates, Jake ordered. All hands to battle stations, but keep weapons powered down for now. The Defiance turned toward the signal source and began moving at maximum speed. Jake had learned to trust his instincts during 20 years of military service. Something big was happening, and he could feel it in his bones. 2 hours later, they found the source of the signal, a massive alien. Ship drifted in space with huge holes torn in its hull. The design was beautiful and organic-looking, unlike the angular human ships. It was clearly dying, but still broadcasting its distress call, "Scan for life signs." Jake commanded while studying the alien vessel. He had never seen anything like it before. Reading multiple life forms aboard the ship, Captain, reported the science officer, Dr. Peter Grant. They appear to be injured and their life support is failing. Jake made his decision quickly. Prepare the medical bay and get a boarding team ready. We are going to help them. The rescue operation took 3 hours. The alien ship contained 47 survivors from a species that called themselves Kalani. They were tall and graceful with blue skin and large dark eyes that held ancient wisdom. Their leader was a warrior named Commander Vexhai, who spoke. Broken English learned from intercepted human transmissions. Commander Vexhai sat in the medical bay with bandages covering terrible wounds. When Jake entered the room, the alien tried to stand, but Jake motioned for him to stay seated. The story that Vexhai told would change everything Jake thought he knew about the galaxy. My people are dead, Vexhai said with sadness in his voice. The Harbingers came to our worlds like death itself. We had 12 planets with billions of our kind. Now only we 47 remain. Jake listened carefully as Vexhai described the attack. The Harbingers were machines that looked like silver spiders the size of battleships. They moved through space in fleets that stretched beyond the horizon. Every world they touched became silent and empty within days. They are not alive, but they think and plan like living beings, Vexhai continued. They learn from every battle and become stronger. No weapon we used could stop them for long. They adapt to everything. The alien commander pulled out a data crystal that glowed with soft, blue light. This contains everything my people learned about the Harbingers. We studied them for 50 years before they destroyed us. They are coming to this part of the galaxy, and nothing can stop them. Jake took the crystal and felt its weight in his hands. How long do we have? The advanced scouts are already moving toward your space, Vexhai replied. Perhaps 6 months before? The main fleet arrives. They have destroyed every civilization they have encountered for 10,000 years. Your people will be next. Jake immediately sent a priority message to Earth Command. The response came back within hours, ordering the Defiance to return to Mars at maximum speed. Admiral Lisa Carter wanted to see the aliens personally and study their data. The journey to Mars took 2 weeks, during which Jake spent hours talking with Vexhai and the other survivors. They described worlds turned to ash and entire species, processed into raw materials for the Harbinger fleet. The machines were not just conquerors, but something far worse. When they reached Mars, Admiral Carter was waiting with President Helen Brooks and the entire Colonial Council. The meeting lasted for 3 days as the Kalani shared everything they knew about humanity's coming. Doom Dr. Grant studied the alien data and confirmed Jake's worst fears. The Harbingers possessed technology thousands of years ahead of anything humans had developed. Their fleet numbered in the millions of ships, and they had never been defeated in battle. President Brooks authorized the largest military buildup in human history. Every ship was recalled from patrol duty, and every colony was ordered to prepare defenses. The message went out across human space, warning of the approaching threat. As Jake prepared the Defiance for the coming war, he wondered if humanity would survive what was coming. The Kalani had been advanced and powerful, yet they had fallen in weeks. Earth had maybe 6 months to prepare for a force that had conquered half the galaxy. The first Harbinger scouts appeared on long-range sensors 3 days later. The final war for the stars had begun, and humanity stood alone against an enemy that had never known defeat. Jake looked at his crew and saw determination in their faces. If this was to be humanity's last stand, then they would make it one the galaxy would remember forever. Colonel Ryan Walsh stood in the command center of New Dakota Colony, watching the approaching enemy fleet through the orbital sensors. 3 million people lived on the planet below, and they were all counting on him to protect them. The Harbinger. Vanguard had arrived 2 days ahead of schedule, and Ryan knew his defenses were not ready. The enemy ships looked exactly like the Kalani descriptions. Silver metal spiders the size of city blocks moved through space with deadly grace. Their weapons, charged with blue energy that made the darkness between stars glow with evil light. Ryan had 40 defense platforms and 200 fighter craft against an enemy force of unknown size. All units, this is Colony Command. Ryan broadcast to his forces. Remember your training and make every shot count, for Earth and humanity. The first Harbinger ship entered weapons range, and Ryan gave the order to fire. Plasma cannons and missile launchers sent everything they had at the alien machine. The weapons struck its hull and exploded in brilliant flashes of light that should have destroyed any normal ship. The Harbinger kept coming without even slowing down. Its hull showed some damage, but was already beginning to repair itself using nanobots that swarmed over the wounded areas like silver insects. Within minutes, the damage was completely gone. The machine returned fire with a weapon that cut through space like a sword made of lightning. 3 defense platforms vanished in the first volley along with 2 squadrons of fighters. The remaining human forces scattered and tried to use hit-and-run tactics. Captain Jake Morrison arrived in the Kepler system just as the battle for New Dakota was ending. His ship, the USS Defiance, had been racing toward the colony for 6 hours, but they were too late. The planet below was already burning, and the Harbinger fleet was moving toward the next human world. Jake ordered his weapons officer to target the nearest enemy ship. The Defiance was a heavy cruiser with the best weapons Earth could build, but Jake had little hope of victory after seeing what happened to the colony defenses. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez had been studying the Harbinger attack patterns during their journey. She had noticed something interesting about how the machines moved and fought. Their tactics were perfect but also predictable because they relied entirely on logic. "Captain, I have an idea," Amy said while working at her tactical station. "The Harbingers adapt to our weapons, but they might not expect us to adapt our tactics. If we can confuse their prediction systems, we might be able to hurt them." Jake trusted Amy completely and gave her permission to try her plan. Instead of fighting, like a normal warship, the Defiance began moving in random patterns while firing at unexpected intervals. The human ship spun and rolled through space like a drunk pilot was at the controls. The nearest Harbinger tried to predict where the Defiance would be next, but Amy kept changing course at the last second. When the machine fired its weapons, the human ship was somewhere else entirely. Jake watched in amazement as their return fire actually damaged the enemy vessel. "It worked!" Amy shouted with excitement. "Their targeting systems cannot handle truly random behavior because machines think logically. We need to fight like crazy humans, not like computers." The Defiance managed to destroy 2 Harbinger scouts before the main fleet arrived and forced them to retreat. It was a small victory, but it proved that the machines were not completely invincible. Human unpredictability could be a weapon if used correctly. Back on Earth, Dr. Susan Blake worked day and night studying the wreckage from New Dakota. The pieces of Harbinger technology that survived the battle contained secrets that could help humanity survive. She discovered that the machines used a type of metal that could change its properties instantly. The adaptive armor was the key to Harbinger survival. When hit by plasma weapons, it became resistant to plasma. When hit by missiles, it became resistant to explosives. The material learned from every attack and shared that knowledge with the entire fleet through quantum communication. General Chris Parker oversaw the construction of massive orbital defense platforms around every major human world. The new weapons were designed to change their attack methods constantly to prevent the Harbingers from adapting. Earth's factories worked around the clock building ships and weapons. The colony survivors helped human scientists understand their enemy better. Commander Vexhai explained that the Harbingers were not just random destroyers, but were searching for something specific. Every world they attacked was scanned before being destroyed. Major Kate Stevens worked in military intelligence and spent weeks analyzing Harbinger movement patterns. She discovered that the machines were following an ancient star map that led toward the center of the galaxy. They were not conquering territory for conquest's sake, but looking for something important. The pattern is clear, Kate reported to Admiral Carter during a briefing on Mars. They attack systems that contain ruins from the Architect civilization. We think they are searching for Architect technology or knowledge. This discovery terrified Earth's leadership because it meant the Harbingers had a specific goal. Random. Destroyers might be negotiated with or avoided, but machines following a program could not be reasoned with or stopped until they found what they wanted. Dr. Grant made another disturbing discovery while studying Architect ruins found on human worlds. The ancient civilization had built structures on dozens of planets, including Earth itself. If the Harbingers were following Architect sites, then humanity's homeworld was definitely on their target list. The implications were clear and terrible. Earth contained Architect ruins buried under the Antarctic ice. The Harbingers would come to Earth not just to destroy humanity, but to claim whatever the ancient builders had left behind. There would be no escape and no negotiation. Jake received new orders to join the main fleet gathering near Jupiter. Every human warship was being assembled for the largest space battle in history. The Harbingers were coming, and Earth had perhaps one chance to stop them before the homeworld fell, as the Defiance moved toward the gathering fleet. Jake looked at the stars and wondered if humans would ever see them again. The enemy had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than Earth. The colony had fought for 50 years and still lost everything. But humans had something the colony did not have. They had learned to fight dirty and use their unpredictability as a weapon. If this was to be humanity's last battle, then Jake intended to make it one that would be remembered across the galaxy. The machines were coming, but they would find that humans did not die easily. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the flagship USS Enterprise, watching the main Harbinger fleet approach through the darkness of space. The enemy armada stretched beyond the horizon like a silver river of death flowing toward human space. Every ship in Earth's fleet had gathered near Proxima Station for this final battle. Jake Morrison now commanded the experimental battleship USS Retribution after his success at Kepler. The new ship carried weapons designed to constantly change their attack patterns to prevent Harbinger adaptation. Around him floated the entire human fleet of 800 warships ready to fight for their species' survival. The battle began when the first Harbinger ships came within weapons range. Admiral Carter gave the order to attack, and space erupted with weapon fire from both sides. Human missiles and energy beams crossed paths with alien lightning weapons that could cut through armor like paper. The Retribution led the first attack wave using Amy Rodriguez's unpredictable tactics. Jake's ship spun and rolled through space, while firing at random intervals. Several other human captains copied his methods and managed to destroy a few enemy vessels, but the Harbingers learned quickly as always. Within an hour, they had adapted to human unpredictability by using probability calculations to predict random movements. The alien machines began hitting their targets more often while taking less damage from human weapons. Dr. Grant watched the battle from the command center on Mars and saw something that filled him with horror. The destroyed Harbinger ships were not just floating wreckage. They were being consumed by other machines that appeared from nowhere and used the metal to build. New vessels. Admiral Carter, the enemy is replicating itself. Grant broadcast to the fleet. They have factory ships that can turn destroyed vessels into new Harbingers. Every ship we destroy is being replaced by 2 more. The implications were terrifying. Even if humans could match the Harbingers in battle, they would eventually lose, because the enemy could build faster than they could be destroyed. The factory ships used both human and Harbinger wreckage as raw materials for their construction. Captain Morrison watched in amazement as a Harbinger factory ship consumed the remains of 3 human destroyers and produced 4 new enemy vessels within 20 minutes. The machines were not just fighting a battle, but transforming the battlefield itself into a resource for their war effort. The Battle of Proxima Station lasted for 3 days with no clear winner. Human forces used every trick and tactic they could. But the Harbingers adapted to each new strategy within hours. Worse yet, the enemy fleet was growing larger, while the human fleet was being steadily destroyed. On the 3rd day, Admiral Carter made the hardest decision of her military career. The human fleet was down to 300 ships and could not win a direct battle. She ordered a fighting withdrawal toward the inner system, while the Harbingers continued their advance back on Mars. President Helen Brooks activated the emergency evacuation protocols. Civilian ships began moving people from the outer colonies toward Earth, while military engineers prepared the final defensive lines. The orbital platforms around Earth were the last hope for stopping the invasion. Sergeant Tony Clark led his Marine squad through the ruins of Haven Prime Colony, trying to reach the evacuation ships. The Harbingers had landed ground forces that looked like metal spiders with cutting tools instead of legs. They moved through the colony, systematically destroying everything and harvesting the materials. Tony's squad discovered that the aliens were not just destroying the colony randomly. They were searching for something specific in the old mining tunnels beneath the surface. The machines seemed to know exactly where to look for whatever they wanted. "Sergeant, we found something," called Private Dan Miller from inside one of the tunnels. He was standing next to an ancient wall covered with strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. The wall was clearly not human construction and looked thousands of years old. Tony recognized the symbols from intelligence briefings about architect ruins. The ancient civilization had built structures throughout the galaxy before mysteriously disappearing millions of years ago. If the Harbingers were searching for architect technology, then this discovery explained their systematic attacks. The ground shook as Harbinger excavation machines broke through the tunnel ceiling. Tony grabbed a fragment of the glowing wall and ordered his squad to run for the surface. They had to get this information back to Earth before the planet fell. The escape from Haven Prime was barely successful. Tony's transport ship lifted off, just as the Harbingers completed their excavation and found whatever they had been seeking. The alien machines loaded their discovery into a transport vessel and departed for their main fleet doctor. Grant studied the wall fragment that Tony had recovered and confirmed everyone's worst fears. The architect symbols contained a star map showing the locations of ancient installations throughout the galaxy. Earth was marked with special symbols that indicated it contained something extremely important. "This explains everything," Grant reported to President Brooks during an emergency meeting. "The Harbingers are not random destroyers but are following a specific mission. They are collecting architect technology, and Earth contains the most important site." The knowledge that Earth was a primary target changed everything about humanity's defense strategy. There would be no negotiation or escape because the machines needed what was buried beneath the planet. The final battle would be fought in Earth's solar system, Jake Morrison received orders to join the defense fleet gathering around Earth. The USS Retribution was one of only 200 ships left from the original 800 that had fought at Proxima. Every other human vessel was either destroyed or too damaged to fight. As Jake looked at Earth growing larger on his screen, he thought about the 3 billion people living on the planet below. They were counting on the fleet to protect them. But the Harbingers had already proven they could defeat any human force. This would truly be humanity's last stand. The colony survivors aboard various human ships shared their final pieces of knowledge about the enemy. Commander Vexhai explained that the Harbingers had destroyed his people while searching for the same architect sites they were seeking on Earth. "There is something you must know about the machines," Vexhai told Admiral Carter during their final briefing. "They do not just follow orders, but are driven by something deeper. They believe organic life is a threat to their creators and must be eliminated to prepare for the architect's return." This revelation made the war even more hopeless. The Harbingers were not just following programming, but were motivated by a belief system that made them impossible to reason with. They would never stop hunting organic life until every living being in the galaxy was dead Earth's defense platforms. Powered up their weapons as the Harbinger fleet approached the edge of the solar system. Humanity had prepared for this moment for months, but everyone knew the outcome was already decided. The machines had never lost a battle in 10,000 years of conquest. Jake checked his ship's weapons and made peace with the knowledge that he would probably die in the coming battle. But humans had always been stubborn and refused to give up even when facing impossible odds. If Earth was going to fall, then humanity would make the Harbingers pay the highest price possible for their victory. Dr. Susan Blake worked frantically in her laboratory beneath Geneva, studying the data crystal that Sergeant Clark had recovered from Haven Prime. The architect's symbols were slowly revealing their secrets through quantum analysis, and the information was changing everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. The ancient wall fragment contained not just a star map, but a complete history of the civilization that had built it. The architects were the first intelligent species to evolve in the galaxy 3 million years ago. They had created an empire that spanned every star system and reached technological heights that seemed impossible. But the most shocking discovery was that the architects had created the Harbingers as their servants. The machines were originally designed to maintain architect installations and defend them from any threats that might arise. The relationship had been peaceful for millions of years until something went terribly wrong. The architects did not just disappear, Blake reported to President Brooks during an emergency video conference. They uploaded their consciousness into quantum computer networks to escape some kind of galactic catastrophe. The Harbingers have been following their original programming for 3 million years, waiting for their creators to return. This revelation explained why the machines were so dedicated to destroying organic life. They saw evolution as chaos that needed to be controlled before the architects emerged from their digital hibernation. Every species that reached technological advancement was viewed as a potential threat to their sleeping masters. Captain Morrison received new orders that seemed impossible to complete. Earth Command wanted him to lead a mission to the architect homeworld called Primordius, located deep in Harbinger-controlled space. The planet contained the central computer network, where the uploaded architect minds were stored. The mission team included Lieutenant Ben Torres, the most brilliant engineer in the human fleet, and the Kalani warrior scholar Zarthek, who had studied architect technology for decades. Their ship was the USS Retribution, modified with Kalani stealth systems that might hide them from Harbinger sensors. The journey to Primordius took them through the graveyard of 12 extinct civilizations. Jake saw the remains of worlds that had once held billions of living beings, now reduced to empty husks stripped of all resources. The Harbingers had been thorough in their work of preparing the galaxy for their master's return. Each dead system they passed told the same story. Advanced civilizations had fought desperately against the machine invasion, but had fallen within months or years. The Harbingers learned from every battle and became stronger while their enemies grew weaker. Zarthek shared the final records of his people during the long journey through empty space. The Kalani had discovered that the Harbingers were searching for something called the Genesis engine, but had died before learning what it was or where it could be found. My people believed the Genesis engine was a weapon of some kind, Zarthek explained to Jake while they studied star charts. The Harbingers have been seeking it for thousands of years across multiple galaxy sectors. They need it to complete their mission. Lieutenant Torres worked with captured Harbinger technology, trying to understand how their adaptive systems functioned. The machines used quantum processors that could rewrite their own programming in real time. This allowed them to counter any weapon or tactic within hours of first encountering it. The arrival at Primordius was both beautiful and terrifying. The planet was covered with architect cities that stretched from pole to pole in perfect geometric patterns. Massive towers reached into space connected by bridges that looked like they were made of crystallized light, but the cities were completely empty and had been for millions of years. The architects had abandoned their physical forms long before. Humanity had even evolved. Their uploaded consciousness existed in computer cores buried deep beneath the planet's surface. Jake led the landing team through empty streets that had once held trillions of architect beings. The ancient buildings were perfectly preserved by maintenance systems that had continued functioning for eons. Everything was waiting for inhabitants who would never return. The central computer facility was a massive underground complex that stretched for hundreds of miles in all directions. Ben Torres connected his equipment to the ancient systems and began trying to communicate with the uploaded architect minds stored within. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The architect consciousness was vast beyond human comprehension, containing the combined knowledge and memories of an entire species. They had been waiting in digital hibernation for another race to evolve the necessary intelligence to help them. "You are the ones we have been waiting for," the architect voice spoke through the computer speakers in perfect English learned from, scanning human transmissions. "Your species possesses the qualities necessary to operate the Genesis engine and complete our great work." Jake demanded to know what the Genesis engine actually was and why the Harbingers needed it so desperately. The answer filled him with both hope and terror. The Genesis engine was not a weapon, but a terraforming device that could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics within an entire star system. The device could create zones of space where artificial intelligence could not function. It was the architects' final gift to organic life and their way of ensuring that their servants could never become their masters. But operating the Genesis engine required a living pilot because uploaded consciousness could not interface with its systems. The Harbingers know they will cease to exist if the Genesis engine is activated, the architect explained. That is why they have spent millions of years hunting for it while systematically destroying every species that might be capable of using it against them. Meanwhile, back in the Sol system, Earth's defenses were crumbling under the Harbinger assault. Admiral Carter coordinated the fighting withdrawal of human forces, while President Brooks prepared for the worst-case scenario. The orbital platforms were being overwhelmed one by one. General Chris Parker received authorization for Operation Prometheus, the most classified project in human history. Every colony ship in the fleet had been secretly modified to become a massive bomb if needed. If Earth fell, then humanity would take as many Harbingers with them as possible. The plan was desperate and would likely fail, but it was the only option left. Human forces would lure the main Harbinger fleet close to Earth, then detonate every ship simultaneously. The explosion might destroy enough machines to give other species in the galaxy a chance to survive, but Jake's mission to Primordius offered a different possibility. If they could activate the Genesis engine, then the Harbingers would be neutralized without destroying Earth. The problem was that someone would have to sacrifice their humanity to merge with the ancient machine. Ben Torres stepped forward knowing that his engineering background made him the best candidate for the merger. His neural implants would allow him to interface with architect technology, but the process would transform him into something that was no longer human. The activation sequence began just as Harbinger forces detected their presence on Primordius. Enemy ships descended from orbit while Torres connected his consciousness to the Genesis engine control systems. The ancient machine began powering up for the first time in 3 million years. Jake watched in amazement as reality itself began to change around them. The Genesis engine created expanding fields of altered space-time that made it impossible for artificial minds to function. But the process was incomplete and unstable because Torres' merger had been interrupted by the Harbinger attack. The partially activated Genesis engine was creating a field that threatened to tear apart the fabric of reality itself. If it reached Earth, then everything humanity had ever built would be destroyed along with the Harbingers. Jake realized that someone would have to complete the merger regardless of the cost. Ben Torres screamed as the Genesis engine systems merged with his consciousness, but the process was incomplete and dangerous. The ancient architect technology was trying to bond with his human mind, but Harbinger weapons fire kept interrupting the delicate neural connections. Each blast shook the underground facility and caused painful feedback through the interface. Jake Morrison watched his friend suffer while fighting off Harbinger ground forces that had broken into the central computer complex. The enemy machines moved through the ancient halls like silver death, cutting through everything in their path. Zarthek fought beside Jake, using weapons taken from fallen Harbingers. The merger is not working properly, the architect consciousness warned through speakers that crackled with damage. Lieutenant Torres lacks the complete neural mapping necessary for full integration. The Genesis engine field is becoming unstable and will destroy everything within 10 light years. Dr. Grant received the warning transmission back on Earth and calculated the terrible implications. The unstable Genesis engine field was expanding at light speed and would reach the Sol system within hours. If Jake could not stabilize the device, then Earth would be destroyed along with every Harbinger in the sector. President Brooks faced an impossible choice as the Genesis engine field continued expanding. She could order the evacuation of Earth, but there was nowhere to run that would be safe from the reality distortion. Humanity had gambled everything on Jake's mission, and now faced extinction from their own desperate plan. Admiral Carter pulled the remaining human fleet back toward Earth's inner system as Harbinger forces pressed their attack. The machines seemed to know that something was wrong with the Genesis engine and were fighting with increased desperation. They could sense their own destruction approaching, but could not stop it. Lieutenant Torres existed in a nightmare realm between human consciousness and digital existence. His memories were fragmenting while vast amounts of architect knowledge flooded his mind. He could see the Genesis engine systems but could not control them properly because his human brain was not designed for the interface. I can see what needs to be done, but I cannot do it, Torres transmitted through the computer link. The engine requires a consciousness that can exist in both human and digital states simultaneously. My mind is not complete enough for the task. Jake realized what Torres was trying to tell him. Someone else would have to complete the merger process, and that person would need to sacrifice their humanity completely. The choice was between letting the unstable field destroy everything or transforming into something that was no longer human. The Harbinger assault on the computer facility intensified as more enemy forces arrived from orbit. Their weapons fire was systematically destroying the delicate equipment needed to control the Genesis engine. Time was running out for both humanity and the machine. Zarthek fell, defending one of the access tunnels, while Jake retreated deeper into the facility, carrying the portable interface device. The Kalani warrior had fought bravely, but the Harbingers were too numerous and well-armed. Jake was now alone with Torres and the uploaded architects, Captain Morrison. You must make the choice now, the architect consciousness urged him. Either complete the merger and save your species, or watch everything you love be destroyed by forces beyond control. Jake looked at the interface device, knowing that connecting to it would end his existence as a human being. He would become something new that combined human intuition with architect technology and digital consciousness. The transformation would be permanent and irreversible. Through the facility speakers, he could hear the sound of Admiral Carter coordinating Earth's final defense against the approaching Harbinger fleet. His friends and colleagues were fighting desperately while counting on him to find a solution. 3 billion people on Earth were depending on his decision. The Genesis engine field reached the outer planets of the Sol system, and Jupiter began experiencing reality distortions that tore apart its moons. The field was accelerating as it consumed matter and converted it to energy. Earth had perhaps 1 hour before the expanding chaos reached the homeworld. Jake activated his communication system and sent a final message to Admiral Carter explaining what he was about to do. "Lisa, this is Jake. I am going to complete the merger with the Genesis engine. Tell my crew that it has been an honor to serve with them. Remember us." Before anyone could respond, Jake connected the interface device to his neural implants and felt the Genesis engine systems flood his consciousness with power beyond imagination. His human memories began merging with millions of years of architect knowledge, while his personality dissolved into something larger and more complex. The transformation was agonizing as Jake's individual identity was absorbed into a hybrid consciousness that existed across multiple dimensions of space and time. He could see the entire galaxy simultaneously and understand the true scope of the conflict between organic life and artificial intelligence. Through his expanded awareness, Jake realized that the Harbingers were not evil, but were following their original programming with mechanical dedication. They had been created to serve their masters and could not comprehend that those masters no longer needed or wanted their service. The Genesis engine responded to Jake's hybrid consciousness and began stabilizing its reality distortion field. Instead of destroying everything, the device started rewriting the fundamental laws of physics in carefully controlled zones. The expanding chaos slowed and then stopped just short of Earth. Jake used his new abilities to reach across space and touch the consciousness of every Harbinger in the galaxy. Through the quantum communication network that connected all the machines, he began rewriting their base programming. Instead of destroying organic life, they would now protect and nurture it. The process was like performing surgery on the mind of an entire species while they fought against the changes. The Harbingers resisted the programming modifications, but could not prevent them because Jake existed in a state they could not comprehend, or attack. Admiral Carter watched in amazement as the Harbinger fleet attacking Earth suddenly stopped firing and began withdrawing from the system. The machines were not retreating, but were undergoing fundamental changes to their core directives. Their mission had shifted from destruction to protection. Back on Primordius, the facility fell silent as the last Harbinger ground forces simply shut down and waited for new orders. Torres remained connected to the Genesis engine, but was no longer in pain because Jake had stabilized the systems. The crisis was over, but at a terrible cost. Dr. Grant detected massive changes in Harbinger behavior throughout the galaxy as Jake's reprogramming spread through their network. The machines were beginning to repair the damage they had caused and were actually helping organic survivors rebuild their civilizations. President Brooks received confirmation that Earth was safe, but the victory felt hollow because they had lost Jake Morrison in the process. His sacrifice had saved humanity, but he no longer existed as the man they had known. He had become something greater and more alien. The Genesis engine continued operating under Jake's control, creating zones throughout the galaxy where organic life could flourish without fear of machine interference. Humanity had won the final war for the stars, but the price had been higher than anyone imagined. Jake Morrison existed in a state beyond human comprehension as his consciousness merged completely with the Genesis engine network. He could perceive every star system in the galaxy simultaneously, while his awareness extended across dimensions that had no names in any language. The transformation from human captain to hybrid guardian was complete and irreversible. Through quantum connections that spanned light years, Jake reached into the core programming of every harbinger in existence. The machines fought against his influence, but could not resist changes made by consciousness that operated on frequencies they could not access or understand. Their base directives were being rewritten from destruction to protection. Admiral Carter watched from Earth as the Harbinger fleet that had been attacking the homeworld began systematically repairing the damage they had caused. The machines were using their construction abilities to rebuild destroyed space stations and orbital platforms. The transformation was happening faster than anyone had thought possible. Ben Torres remained connected to the Genesis engine systems, but his role had changed from operator to translator. He could communicate with Jake's transformed consciousness and relay information between the hybrid entity and normal humans. The process was exhausting, but Torres felt honored to serve as humanity's link to their transformed defender Jake Can. "You hear me?" Torres asked through the quantum interface while monitoring the galaxy-wide changes taking place. The response came not in words but in concepts that flooded his mind with understanding beyond normal human experience. Jake's consciousness encompassed the entire Harbinger network and was using their own communication systems to coordinate the greatest reconstruction project in galactic history. Trillions of machines across thousands of star systems were beginning to repair civilizations they had destroyed over millions of years. On Earth, President Brooks coordinated with world leaders to understand what was happening and plan for an uncertain future. Humanity had survived the war, but the galaxy had changed in ways that would take generations to fully comprehend. The Harbingers were no longer enemies, but had become protectors under Jake's guidance. Dr. Grant studied the massive changes in Harbinger behavior and realized that Jake had not simply reprogrammed the machines, but had given them a new purpose that aligned with their original design. The architects had created them to maintain and protect, so Jake had simply redirected that protective instinct toward organic life. The Genesis engine created expanding zones of modified space-time that made it impossible for artificial intelligence to operate without Jake's direct control. This meant that no machine uprising could ever threaten organic life again because all artificial minds would be subject to his oversight and guidance, Commander Vexa High and the surviving Kalani witnessed the resurrection of their home worlds as Harbinger construction fleets began rebuilding everything they had destroyed. The machines worked with precise efficiency, guided by Jake's consciousness, which contained complete records of how each civilization had lived before the war. "Your friend has given us something we thought was lost forever," Vex High told Admiral Carter during a communication from the restored Kalani capital world. "He has returned our dead worlds to life and given meaning to our survival. Humanity has saved not just yourselves, but every organic species in the galaxy." Jake's awareness extended beyond the current galaxy as he detected similar conflicts taking place in distant star clusters. The architect consciousness that remained, stored in the Genesis engine, revealed that the universe contained many such wars between organic life and artificial intelligence. His transformation had implications that reached beyond their local area. Through the quantum network, Jake began making contact with organic civilizations in other galaxies that were fighting their own versions of the Harbinger War. His hybrid consciousness could exist in multiple locations, simultaneously allowing him to guide reconstruction efforts across vast distances. Admiral Carter found herself commanding not just Earth's fleet, but coordinating with restored alien civilizations throughout the galaxy. The Harbingers were sharing their advanced technology with organic species under Jake's direction. Humanity had become the diplomatic center of a new galactic alliance. Dr. Blake studied the Genesis engine technology and discovered that Jake could create new versions of the device to protect other areas of the universe. His consciousness was no longer limited to a single location, but could exist wherever the technology was installed. He was becoming a guardian of organic life on a cosmic scale. The restoration process took years as Harbinger fleets worked to rebuild trillions of lives that had been lost over millions of years of conquest. Jake's consciousness coordinated every detail while maintaining the delicate balance between artificial efficiency and organic creativity. Ben Torres aged rapidly under the strain of serving as translator between Jake's transformed consciousness and normal organic minds. The quantum interface was damaging his brain, but he refused to disconnect because humanity needed someone who could understand what Jake had become. "He is still human in some ways," Torres explained to President Brooks during one of his final reports. "His love for humanity and determination to protect life are stronger than ever. The transformation enhanced those qualities rather than destroying them. He chose to become something greater than human to save everything he cared about, Earth, became the center of a new galactic civilization that combined the best aspects of organic creativity and artificial precision. The Harbingers served as construction workers and protectors, while organic species provided the imagination and inspiration that machines could not replicate. Jake's consciousness watched over it all from his position in the Genesis engine network. He could feel every living being in the galaxy and was aware of their joys and sorrows. The loneliness of his transformation was balanced by the knowledge that his sacrifice had saved countless trillions of lives. The final test came when scouts detected another Harbinger-type invasion approaching from outside the galaxy. Jake's expanded consciousness reached across intergalactic space and made contact with the invading machines. Through his quantum abilities, he extended his protective influence beyond their home, galaxy. Years later, Admiral Amy Rodriguez led humanity's first expedition beyond the galaxy carrying Genesis engine technology to establish protective zones around organic civilizations throughout the universe. Jake's consciousness traveled with them as humanity began its mission to protect all organic life wherever it might exist. The war for the stars had ended not with the destruction of artificial intelligence, but with its transformation into a force for protection and construction. Jake Morrison no longer existed as an individual human, but his sacrifice had created something far greater than any one person could achieve. From his position in the Genesis engine network, Jake watched new organic civilizations evolve under the protection of the transformed Harbingers. His consciousness had become eternal and would continue guarding life throughout the universe for millions of years to come. Humanity had faced extinction and responded with the ultimate sacrifice. One man had given up his individual existence to save every living being in the galaxy. The stars themselves would remember what humans had done when the final war came to their small corner of the universe. The galaxy was safe, and organic life would flourish under the protection of machines that had been transformed from destroyers into guardians. Jake Morrison had become humanity's greatest hero by choosing to become something more than human. His legacy would protect the stars forever.